Antarctica. You know, it's the coldest, driest, most remote continent on our planet. For more than 60 years, it's been this incredible natural reserve, a symbol of peace and science, totally protected from all the world's squabbles. But that peace? Well, it's now standing on some seriously thin ice. The continent is finding itself right at the heart of a new, high-stakes global drama.
And it all kicks off with this one absolutely staggering number, 511 billion. That's how many barrels of oil and gas equivalent Russian seismic surveys have apparently found hiding under the Antarctic ice. Now, this isn't just a big find. It's the kind of discovery that could change everything.
I mean, to put that number into perspective for you, it's nearly double what Saudi Arabia has in its proven reserves. And get this, it's sitting mostly in the Weddell Sea, an area where territorial claims from the UK, Argentina, and Chile all overlap. I find this huge in a place that's already contested. Well, it threatens to completely upend the delicate balance that has kept Antarctica peaceful for decades.
So you'll have to be wondering, right? With that much potential money locked away under the ice, what's actually stopping a modern-day gold rush on the last untouched continent on Earth? Well, the answer lies in a pretty remarkable international agreement.
That agreement is called the Antarctic Treaty System. You can think of it like a legal shield that's been protecting the continent for decades. But as we're about to find out, that shield, it's not exactly unbreakable.
The treaty itself is honestly a miracle of Cold War diplomacy. Think about it. In 1959, at the height of the Cold War, 12 nations, including the US and the Soviet Union, got together and agreed to set aside this entire continent as a natural reserve for peace and science. It basically hit the pause button on all territorial disputes and banned any military activity. It's this amazing model of international cooperation that's held up for over 60 years. Then, in 1991, the environmental protections got a major boost with something called the Madrid Protocol, which flat-out banned all mineral resource activities. But, and this is the critical detail, while the ban is indefinite, it's not necessarily permanent. When the protocol officially started in 1998, it kicked off a 50-year countdown, which brings us to one very, very important date, 2048.
And this 2048 deadline, well, that's the potential crack in the shield we were just talking about. What seemed like a lifetime away is now getting close enough to actually shape the strategic plans of nations all over the world.
So here's how it works. There's a clause, Article 25 of the Madrid Protocol, that allows any of the treaty's main decision-making countries to call for a review conference anytime after 2048. And the whole point of that conference? To modify or amend the protocol, including, you guessed it, the ban on mining.
Now, look, getting rid of the ban isn't supposed to be easy. There's a really high bar for approval. But check out step 4 on this slide. That's the escape clause. This is the real kicker. If a new agreement can't be reached and made official within 3 years, any nation can just leave. They can withdraw from the protocol, and 2 years after that, they'd be legally free to go after those resources, which could cause the entire system to just fall apart. And this is exactly how that looming deadline is creating a brand new geopolitical chessboard right there on the ice. Countries are already positioning themselves, not for what's happening today, but for what might be possible after 2048. And their actions are this fascinating and honestly kind of chilling mix of science, strategy, and long-term ambition. Just take a look at this quote from a Chinese diplomat all the way back in 2009. It is so revealing. It pretty much suggests that, for some, the mining ban was never really seen as permanent, but more like a timeout, a period to get ready. It completely reframes all that scientific research and infrastructure building in a much more strategic light, doesn't it? And you can see this split playing out in what countries say their priorities are. On one hand, you have Western nations that publicly focus on things like upholding the treaty and environmental conservation. But on the other hand, countries like China and Russia often talk about balancing protection and use. They've also been the ones repeatedly blocking the creation of new marine protected areas, which creates a lot of friction in a system that's supposed to run on consensus. China, especially, has been systematically expanding its footprint down there. They have a stated goal of becoming a great polar power. Their newest station, Xinling, is placed very strategically near America's McMurdo Station, and that's raised a lot of concern that its infrastructure could be dual use, for science, but also for surveillance, supporting China's broader strategic goals. And that brings us right back to Russia.
Moscow insists that its massive seismic surveys are purely for scientific purposes. But a lot of experts and Western governments are, let's just say, skeptical. They argue that Russia is exploiting a real gray area, doing research that looks an awful lot like prospecting for future commercial use. They're testing the absolute limits of the treaty. Because here's the thing, what happens in Antarctica doesn't stay in Antarctica. The stakes here are so much bigger than just geopolitics and oil. We're talking about the stability of the entire planet. This right here is the Thwaites Glacier, and scientists have given it a pretty terrifying nickname, the Doomsday Glacier. And the reason is terrifyingly simple. It's melting fast, and it's basically acting like a giant cork, holding back the rest of the West Antarctic ice sheet.
If Thwaites were to collapse, just that one glacier holds enough ice to raise global sea levels by 65 centimeters. That's over 2 feet. But the real nightmare scenario is the chain reaction it could set off, potentially leading to an unstoppable sea level rise of several meters that would completely redraw coastlines all around the world. And any industrial activity on the continent would only speed that up.
And here is the ultimate, mind-bending irony. At the exact moment in history when humanity needs to be leaving fossil fuels in the ground to stop a climate catastrophe, we've stumbled upon one of the world's biggest untapped reserves. The International Energy Agency has been crystal clear about this. If we're serious about our climate goals, there can be no new oil and gas fields, period.
So all of this leads to a really compelling question from policy experts and scientists. Why are we letting the slow-motion crisis just build and build towards 2048? Why not make a clear choice right now?
The proposal is to act before it's a crisis and turn the current temporary mining ban into a permanent, ironclad prohibition on hydrocarbon extraction forever. The argument is pretty simple. It's a heck of a lot easier to forbid an industry that doesn't exist yet than to try and shut one down once the money starts flowing. A now and never ban would send a huge signal on climate action, it would cool down these building geopolitical tensions, and it would double down on Antarctica's special status as a continent for all of humanity.
So ultimately, the world is at a crossroads. The discovery of 511 billion barrels of oil has turned what was a distant deadline into a really urgent question. Are we going to choose to strengthen the shield that has protected this incredible continent? Or are we going to let our last frontier become our next battlefield? The choice that gets made will define the future of Antarctica, and honestly, our planet, for centuries to come.